Okay, Sicha is een chelik. You test of the Sicha is chelik. You test or the Sicha. Rebbe starts with the posik. The posik Hashem Elokeinu v'seichem yesiv aleichem kechem elofomim yivorach eschem kasher dibra lochem. The posik says that Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to the Eden, and he said, "The Eibishter, the God of your ancestors, will add to you more than you are 1,000 times, and He will bless you like He said to you." Which means like this. This comes right after a posik before. The posik before says that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to the Eden, Hashem Elokeichem hirbeeschem, Hashem, your God, multiplied you. V'hinchem hayem kecheichli hashamayim l'reiv. And you are today like the stars of the heaven, a lot. And Rashi explained, what does that mean? It doesn't mean they were a lot. They were not like the stars. They were only 600,000 Yidden. But it means that you are like hayem, you are like the day. You're compared to the day. Which means you are strong, you're existing, you're strong, like the sun, like the moon, like the stars. So this is what the Eibishter made you at this point. And then Moshe Rabbeinu added, and Hashem will add to what He already giving you now, He will add 1,000 times as much. And then Moshe said, and He will bless you like He said to them, to you, to them. State the Medrash, or the Medrash says, and Rashi brings it down also, Omer lo Yisrael. The Yidden said to Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu said that Hashem should bless you 1,000 times as much, the Yidden said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbeinu Moshe, our Rebbe Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'nosa kisva li'berchasenu. Hashem did not give a limit to the brachas. V'ato amarto elof panim. You gave a limit. You said 1,000 times. It's a lot, but it's a limit. Amar lahem. So Moshe said to them, Masha berachti eschem mishali berachti. The bracha that I said 1,000 times as much, that's the bracha I am giving you. When Hashem will come, He will bless you like He said, which means a bracha was hotin ken kitzvah, a bracha that does not have a limit. This is what the Chazal say in the Medrash, just Rashi brings. Is you do a dikasha in them, so we know the question like this. The Reibish the benchman sein bracha was hotin ken kitzvah. The Reibish is going to give the bracha. It has no limit. Was gidan su the bracha for Moshe Yosef elapomim. So what do we gain by having the bracha of Moshe 1,000 times as much? That 1,000 times as much is bottle within Bligvul. If you have a bracha, Bligvul, an infinite bracha, so what do we gain by having 1,000 times as much? The Kolish can be Kalvachemer from a Kalvachemer from Yesh Bechlal Masai Monet. Madach, when we say a person says I'll give you 200. In 200 is included 100. So if someone says I'll give you 100, the other one says no, I'll give you 200. So the 100 is nothing. Because if you have 200, you have 100 plus. So if that's said, when both are limited, this is 100 and this is 200. Certainly, if one is unlimited and one is limited, what do we gain by having the limited bracha if we're going to have the unlimited bracha? So what do we need Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha of 1,000 times as much? Well, we're going to have a bracha of Hashem Himself, as Moshe said, of an unlimited amount. The Farshim answer, the roof of Birchas Moshe is in them, the chidush, the specialty of bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu is so. Basically, what he's going to say, according to the Mefarshim, at two different times. The bracha of the Eibishter, which is an unlimited bracha, is only when the Yidden fulfill, keep Torah mitzvahs. The bracha of Moshe is not dependent on a condition that you'll always get. So we understand why we need both. One is, if you do Torah mitzvahs, then you get a bigger bracha. You don't need a smaller bracha. But if you don't do Torah mitzvahs, then the smaller bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu applies. And das is massive, mit dem, was die Gemara sagt, das fits to what the Gemara says up in Posik. There's the Gemara says, the Gemara in Yuma, there's a Posik that says that the mispar, the number of Yidden will be in such a way, you won't count and there would be no number. So we start off by saying there will be a number, and the number will be there is no number. So the Gemara has a question, it's a contradiction. If you say there will be a number, then you say there'll be no number. So the Gemara answers, it's talking about two different times. When it says that there will be no number is when the Yidden do the will of Hashem. And Kan, here, meaning where it says there will be a number, is when the Yidden do not do the will of Hashem. The haste, that means as a brocha bikitzva, a brocha with a limit. When we say there will be the number of Yidden, which means there's a limit, is that is going to be even if the time when the Yidden are not doing mitzvahs, not doing the will of Hashem. But the brocha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is belikitzva, but the brocha of Hashem, which is unlimited, as he uses the lashon lo yisofer, there will be no numbers, it won't be counted. That's when the Yidden do the will of Hashem. So the Gemara says this on the Pasuk, you will have a number and will be no number. But the Meforshim used that Gemara to answer the kasha here too. That when it says here, Moshe Rabbeinu gave a bracha with a number, 1,000 times as much. It's a big number, but it's a number. But then he says the Eibishter will give you a bracha without a number. It's the same idea, that the number will be even when you don't do Torah mitzvah. But if you do Torah mitzvah, then there will be a bracha, a great bracha, without a number, without a limit. Other Be'efin Achar, or some other Meforshim give it a little bit different. The same idea that it's different times, but a little bit different. Birchas Moshe is Mizman Hazeh, the bracha of Moshe is nowadays. Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'zayin Losid Love, the bracha of Hashem, which will be an unlimited bracha, will be in the future. But Dosi Behesem, mit dem steht the Medrash, this also fits to the Medrash that he says concerning the previous pasuk that we said, V'hoya mispar b'nei Yisrael, there will be a number by Yidden, Le Yisofer, which will not be counted. So the Gemara, it says the difference is whether you listen to Hashem or not. The Medrash, it says, as ve'elam haza yesh mispar, nowadays in this world there is a number. But Mashiach will come in the future, then there would be no number. So this again fits to the answer that the Meforshim give. So there are two answers that you give. Both are based on the Nekuda that it's different times. One is the times are whether you do Hashem's will or not. And the other one is the times whether it's now or in the future. But from Loshen HaMedrash Dobe Parsha saying is mashma, but when you look at the Medrash in our Parsha, it seems the Medrash that we quoted right in the beginning of the Sikha, that the way the Yidden asked, why are you giving a limit when David didn't give a limit? So he says, this is my bracha, 1,000 times as much. And David will give you an unlimited bracha. From that Loshen of the Medrash is mashma seems, at the chiluk zwischen the zwei brachas, but steht belayed in them that the difference between two brachas is not different times. Was ein is mishali and the zweite mishal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That one I'm giving, one David is giving. That's the only difference. Aber beide sei voran in demselben Zman. Seems like from simple pshat and medrash at the same time, but depends. There's my bracha and David's bracha at the same time. Das heißt, as when it's do birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu shein lekitzva, according to simple pshat and medrash, means that even when the Eibush's bracha is there, it's a bracha that has no limit, which is unlimited bracha. Ifaran or farnuftu from birchas Moshe shein lekitzva. There's still something important in having Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha, which has a limit. That's what it seems. Because he's always saying the difference is there are two brachas here at the same time. The Medrash doesn't say it's different times. Nochmer, you go even further. Azay is muchrech from stimas piras Rashi do. In Medrash, the Rebbe said is mashmet that way. In Rashi, it's clear. Because Rashi will explain whatever he wants to explain, he explains. From the fact that Rashi doesn't say anything, he says something, he makes it very simple. But bringt Loshen HaMedrash, he brings the Loshen of the Medrash on Keinei Sof Asbir, and then he doesn't explain it. Und der Fun ist echt verstandig, das ist Schute Shel Mikra. And that means that this is a simple pshat. And Rashi doesn't explain how the two things could go together. And he has now order 11 that Rebbe says, because the little Tiras and Pirim is Forshe Rashi now, because if we're going to say that Rashi meant what the Meforshim say, whether that means two different times, whether you do the Eibish's Rotzen or not, or it's two different times now and the Osid Love, if Rashi would mean that, Ein Lechuda Kol Remez B'Pirish Rashi. There's no Remez in Rashi to that at all. So if Rashi doesn't make any Remez, Rashi says Rashi means exactly what he says. There are two brachas, one is mine and one is the Eibish's, and that's it. Doesn't say there are different times. The Rebbe does say in order 11, Avara'ei, Lekama Sif Yud, if you look later, Sif Yud, the Rebbe does go very bekitzer, Pshat in Rashi and Shutesh Mikra, which seems like it is something that fits to the Meforshim. But the way the Rebbe says, if it's Poshe Pshat in Rashi, is mashme that it's not connected to the timing. Und das ist echt mashme, mit dem Shutesh Mikra, v'hoyem bisper b'nei Yisrael, ashalei yomad v'li yisofer. And if you learn that it means at the same time you'll have both brachas, fits to the simple pshat and the other pasuk. We said before the Meforshim fit to the pshat of the Gemara, the pshat of the Medrash in the pasuk, v'hoya mispar b'nei Yisrael le'yisofer. So the two truths, they both, whether it's different times before and after, or it's whether you're doing Hashem's Ratzon or not. But the Rebbe says Rashi is mashmer, the Medrash is mashmer. Rashi is clear that it's talking at the same time, which is also the simple pshat in that pasuk too. But the pshat in that pasuk is as a sretzich do nit wegen besonderes manim. And it says the mispar of the Yidden will be in a way lay a suffer that you won't count it. Doesn't seem to be saying simple pshat 2 different times. Whereas es wird sein mispar b'nei Yisrael in demselben Zman, wenn es wird mekuyen, wenn die Brache von Leib mit lay suffer. That at the same time that you will have the bracha, that there will be no number, no mispar lay suffer. That's the time when the mispar will be. If you look in the simple pshat of the posik, the mispar b'nei Yisrael will be in a form of lay suffer. So we're talking about that mispar will be lay suffer. They'll both be the same time. But the shaila comes up, if that's what it means, so what do we need both? If you have the lay suffer, what do we need the mispar? And the same thing by us. If you have the bracha of the Eibishter, ein lekitzo blig rule, unlimited bracha, what do we need the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is 1,000 times as much, even though it's big, but we don't need it when we have the lay suffer, the ein lekitzo, not a limit. Al derech inyan anal, and the Rebbe says like this. Similar to what we said before, the bracha mugbelis from Moshe Rabbeinu, bet mit bottle gav birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it seems from Rashi, from Medrash and Buchrach and Rashi, and simple pshat and other posik, that the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a limited bracha, will not become nullified, will not become bottled when you have David's bracha. And the question was why? What do we need it for? But Akaponim is mashma that that's it is. We don't know why yet, but it's mashma. We said before that Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha will stay even if you have David's bracha. You find in the bracha Hashem Yesiv Aleichem Gufe. So we find it in the bracha itself where it says Hashem will add to you 1,000 times as much. Just in that bracha, besides the connection to this and to the second half of the posik, that now Hashem will also give you a bigger bracha. In these words itself, where it says Hashem should give you 1,000 times as much, we see this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha will stay even when you have Hashem's bracha. Where do we see it? Like the Medrash teaches, so the Medrash teaches like this: Yeisev Aleichem Kachem. He said Hashem should add to you. Loma Borcham Veloshem Teisvis. Why did he use the word Teisvis? He will add. Because when Hashem adds, he adds more than the Iket, more than the main bracha. The roof the Medrash brings the Gemoyes. So what do we see here? We see here that in these words themselves, Yeisev Hashem Aleichem Kachem Elef Ba'amim, we see the 2 sides to it. How do we see it? Because the Chura is verstandig, not understood. Since the extra that Hashem gives, the extra bracha, is more than the iker, that means that the bracha that he'll give the extra one is more. So why do we still call the original bracha, if what he's going to give you later will be more, then the original bracha is not the iker? Bechura sein die winziger von dem Teisvish HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since that the original one is less than what Hashem will add, that is noch der Maninya von Toffel und Nitiker. So if it's less, it becomes Toffel, becomes secondary. The main one is the extra. And nevertheless, he calls it Iker. See, if he wouldn't use the word Iker, it wouldn't be such a kasha. Because you could say simple pshat. The extra that Hashem gives is more than the original. The original collects $1,000 and they give you more than the original. That makes sense. But it doesn't say that. He'll give you more than the Iker. In other words, even though Hashem will give you much more, the original, which is less, he still refers to it as the Iker. Why is it the Iker? You can't say less is Iker legaba more. You could say first you have less and then you got more. But you can't say that's the Iker. This proves even though what Hashem will add is more than the original, the original doesn't become bottle. We still call it Iker. So in this word itself, we see the 2, that there will be the tasteless of the Eibishter, which is the more, and at the same time, we still say that the less is still called the Iker, which is like over here we say that after the Eibishter he says the Eibishter will give you a bracha that has no limit. Nevertheless, we remain with the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, it does have a limit, which basically means that we need both. We didn't explain it yet, but we see from this that we need both. We need this first, which is the limit, and we also need the unlimited. Wird man das verstehen? Now they will explain. Wird man das verstehen? Bei Hagdim Ateisves Bir und dem Eben dem Monte Maimer Chazal. First to explain more what Maimer Chazal, the statement of the Chazal that we mentioned before, Askan Le Yomed Le Yisofer, when it says in Posik there will be no limit, no number, is Bezman Yisrael. And the Eden are doing the will of Hashem. Khan, the other one where it says there will be a mispar, a number which is limited, is man she'ein neised. That refers to a time when they won't do Ritzei Neshamokim. Now, the Lashon here is Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim and Ein Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim. It doesn't say here clearly whether you're Makayim mitzvahs or not. Now, we know in Chassidus, it speaks about Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim and Ein Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim. Doesn't mean whether you do the mitzvahs or don't do the mitzvahs. And as I said, if we're going to learn like that simple pshat, as the Rebbe is going to explain in a moment, we're going to give the Hakdama. If you say that the way the Medrash says that, when will the brocha be with a mispar? Or as we said before, when will the brocha of Moshe Rabbeinu be? Which is limited, will be if Ein Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim means that you're not doing Torah mitzvahs, then you can't have a brocha. If you're not worth of a brocha, how could you have a brocha? So it must be different. Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim, that expression, or Ein Eisen, means something else. And we're medayik in the words, Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim, you do the will of Hashem. So he says like this, a brocha bechlal kumt doch dafke durch der Aveda vermieden. Get a brocha, you have to do Aveda. Everything that you have to, nothing happens without you doing Aveda. But maybe it's verstandig, as the brocha mugbeles from volume is from that we understand that even the limited brocha, where it says there will be a limit, but it's a brocha. The dugmas birchas Moshe yesiv elefam, like Moshe said, also a limit, 1,000 times as much. But it's a big brocha. It's not unlimited, but it's a big brocha. It's verbunden with Aveda in Israel. It has to be with Aveda. You can't say that brocha, the limited brocha, will be if you don't do anything. Hey, Nation said the Shok, don't do mitzvahs. Can be. Everything only comes if you do Aveda. So what does it mean that brocha, the limited brocha, will come when Ein Nation Ritzei Neshamokim? It doesn't mean when you do mitzvahs. No, this is an Aveda was your felt shleimus. That it's an Aveda which is not complete. You have to do Aveda, but it's missing something. These as the Eidim werden angerufen, Ein Nation Ritzei Neshamokim. Those that do this Aveda, because it means definitely you do an Aveda, but it's not called you're doing the will of Hashem. Because the will of Hashem is to do much more. And you're doing not the whole, not the shleimus, it's called not doing Ritzei Neshamokim. But Dugmas gives an example of Cain was a Gebrach Nichel Lavaye. Cain brought a korban to Hashem. The korban is good. But Adarabek, when der Erste zu bringen, he's the first one that brought. Where as the Nochvel Hevel Hevi Gamul says, Hevel also brought. So Cain did something good. He brought a korban to Hashem. He's the first one to bring a korban. As is what he brought was the stuff that he brought was not good quality. That was his problem. So we see here, we could call it a problem, but it doesn't mean you didn't do anything. Al derech zeh, same thing here. Let's skip this one line for a second. Is yeder aveda mugbelas, every aveda. But if the aveda that you do is limited, the balzi is bemido bemispor, since it's limited with a number, with a measurement, is mandurchim nit eisa mamshech letzei neshamokim. You don't bring down the rotzen of Hashem versus hecha from gvul. The rotzen, the will of Hashem, is higher than gvul. So when you do an aveda that's limited, you will bring down Ein Sof, godly light. To bring down godliness, also limited godliness. But it's not going to bring down the level called rotzen of Hashem, because rotzen of Hashem is unlimited. And he says, similar to by Cain and Hevel, that Cain, he did an aveda, and nevertheless it was a problem. But it doesn't mean he didn't do anything. So certainly here, why is this? Rebbe says here, for sure that the example we're bringing of Cain doesn't fit here. By Cain, he thought he did something bad. The pale mamashi, by bringing that, but he did something bad. Here we're not talking about doing something bad. We're talking about doing a limited aveda. If your aveda is limited, you did. But it's called Ein Nation Ritzei Neshamokim. And it's interesting, in Ha'ora 16, the Rebbe says, Al derech pirish hayidua, like the Mashos says in Broches, and the Sichos talks about it. And the Gemara says the difference between the first parsha of Krishma and the second one. But the Gemara says the first parsha of Krishma is called as man when Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim. That it talks about the time when Yidden do the will of Hashem. The second parsha of Krishma is talking about the time when they don't do the will of Hashem. And the Mashal says, what do you mean they don't do the will of Hashem? The second parsha starts off, if you're going to listen to Hashem, you're going to listen to the mitzvahs. So the Mashal says, doesn't mean you don't listen to mitzvahs. It's not called Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim, because the difference is the first parsha says, Meidecha is bli gvul. If you do b'chol meidecha, that's called Eisen Ritzei Neshamokim. The second parasha, it doesn't say b'chol levavchem, b'chol nafshechem. It doesn't say b'chol meidchem. And meid is bli gvul. Since that's called Ein Eisiv Etzein Shalmokim. Mashal says that's not called doing the will of Hashem. And the way Chassidus explains it, and the way the Rebbe just explained it here, that if you do an Aveda B'Hagbola, your mamshich ruchnis elikus into welt or whatever into yourself in a limited way, a limited darge of elikus. If you do your aveda bligvul, your mamshich a higher darge, the darge of bligvul b'ayla, which is called B'tzeina Shalmokim. So when it says that Mispar is ein eis in B'tzeina Shalmokim, Leia Sofer is eis in B'tzeina Shalmokim, they both mean you're doing, but one is doing in a higher madrege. If you do aveda b'gvul, your mamshich in of mispar, which is limited. If you do aveda bligvul, then your mamshich, the tzayna shemokim, which is bligvul, that's the ein mispar. These are megifinin the tzvei yonim, so much so that even the mispar, which comes ein eis in shemokim, but the Rebbe explains, doesn't mean that you're not doing aveda. It just means you're not doing aveda betachlis hashleimos. We find even deeper than that. We find in Chassidus, it's tzvei yonim mispar ulei yomed v'lei sofer. We find these two in a much refined higher madrege. The Alter Rebbe is mavayet. The Alter Rebbe explains in Avedas Shem B'Shlemuso that when we talk about the serving the Eibush B'Shlemus, mispar, even when you're serving B'Shlemus, but in that gufa there are two madreges. Mispar means Aveda from Kiyama mitzvahs. Mispar means a number. Doing mitzvahs have a number. Mitzvahs are 613. You can't add, you can't take off. Besides that, every mitzvah has a limit. Besides that, there are a limited amount of mitzvahs. Every mitzvah has a limit. Like it says in brings down here in the order 19, Geras HaKodesh. He says there, take Mashal tzitzes. There's a limit. How long the tzitzes have to be? 12 weeks, and more than that, it's nothing. So mitzvahs, the kazayis, mitzvahs have limits. So mispar represents the mitzvahs. Side there's a limited amount. Side there's a limit in every mitzvah, which is an aveda mukbelah. Doing mitzvahs is an aveda that you have to do with the Eibush want, but it's aveda bigvul. When lei yomad, the lei yisofer, when it says there's Indian not to count, is aveda satshuva. That's tshuva and aveda was his hecha for nishtalshus is nagbolah. It's higher than nishtalshus, higher than nagbolah. Tshuva is something which says chassidus, something that you go beyond your limitations. So we see here so much so that when you say ein eis in etzein shalmokim, which is binyan of mispar, could even be in a very high madreg, and it's still called ein eis in etzein shalmokim because you're not mamshel the bligvul. So tshuva is mamshel the bligvul, and mitzvahs are not mamshel the bligvul in their madrege. So we understand the two inyon. Now, if Fizeh comes out like this, the Geret free, we said before, is the Poshet Apirish from Hoya Mispar game, we said before that the simple pshat in the Posek, that the Mispar of Yidden will be in a way that you will not count. The counting will be in that you can't count it. So we said before that the Poshet pshat means, it's not two separate inyonim, two separate times. But the Mispar Alein is in an Eifim for Yomed Sofer, that the Mispar, the Gvul itself, is in the form of Ligvul. That's what he said before. Poshet pshat in the Posek is like that. The mispar will be le'yisofet. So we said before it means at the same time. So that's been the posik, the poshet pshat and posik concerning the mispar of Yidden. Whatever it should mean, but what the means is that the mispar will be le'yisofet. The fun is verstandig, even against the mispar and le'yisofet in the Beit Hashem. Since we said we have the mispar and le'yisofet, the two inyon in Aveda, one is the Aveda of Gvul, one is the Aveda of Bligvul, which he said really is the Aveda of mitzvahs and the Aveda of tshuva. So in that gufa we also find that mispar is verbunden with nilu from le'yisofer. That since we said the mispar and le'yisofer go together, the mispar will be in a form le'yisofer. So ruchnis also. That means that the mispar which goes on mitzvahs is going to be in a form of le'yisofer. How? You could through the mispar, which is something which is not in that the madrege of rotzen of Hashem bligvul. This itself also has an aspect in it which is mamshech the rotzen of Hashem. Mamshech the rotzen elyon was hecha from gvul le'yisofer. Mamshech the rotzen of Hashem, which is higher than the limit, and it goes together. Now the le'yisofer brings the yisofer. The mispar brings the le'yisofer. So then, in that case, so what is the difference between mitzvahs and tshuva? We said mitzvahs is only brings the gvul. Tshuva brings the bligvul. But now we're saying even the mitzvahs bring also the bligvul. So what's the difference? Der Unterschied zwischen the zwei Sugi Aveda is in them, but the difference between these two Avedas is so, was in mitzvahs is am shochas ha-bligvul need meir b'kilui. In mitzvahs, the fact that you bring down the bligvul is not meir, doesn't shine the gilu. The balda Aveda b'gilu is not an aninya from the Mailam Akbala. Since the gilu, what are you doing b'peil? You're doing a mitzvah which is limited. So even though in it there is the bleak gvul that comes down, but that's not the gilui. I guess not the gilui for people who feel these things, not the gilui. But Mela, that's why we still call it mispar. But it's begilim. It's but tshuva, which begili in the person is aveda of ligvul. Aveda is going out of himself, out of his limitations. He's not begilu the inya from leyomet v'leyisofer. There is begilu the fact that it's higher than gvul that you can't count it. But Lapaya, what the pasuk is trying to tell you that the mispar, even the mitzvahs, which is an aveda, which is the gvul, could also be mamshech the ligvul, and that's the pshat that they go together. It's not two different times. That there is a time of mispar, a time of leyisofer. The mispar and the leis in Pshuta Shalmik is in Poshat the Pasuk. And the Ruchnis means the same thing. The mispar is in a form of lei mispar, which means the mispar, the mitzvahs bring down the Amshocha of the Rotzen Hashem, which is the inyan of Ligvul, the beer. And then what do we mean by that? If it's limited thing, mitzvahs are limited, so you're doing an Aveda of limitations, of Agbolas, how does that bring down the Ligvul? We said before, Tshuva, which is Ligvul, brings down the Ligvul. How does the mitzvahs bring down the Ligvul? So he says like this. Mitzvahs are the will of Hashem. Punkt der Rebischter is bligul as is bligul. Just like the Rebischter is unlimited, the mitzvahs are unlimited. Und der Fahr wird durch die mitzvahs nimshach letzeni is borach was is bligul leyasof. And therefore, what we said before, that even the mitzvahs bring down the bligul because the mitzvahs is Ratzon Hashem. But it doesn't fit to what we said before. We said before mitzvahs are agbola. Und das was the mitzvahs are nimdide agbola, the fact that mitzvahs are gvul, are limited. He says, in the it's not that this is a limitation from, so to speak, from the outside. It's not, it's in other words, it's not that the limit, the Eir Eliki that comes down is a limited Eir Eliki. Nor the Reibishter sich allein kivyochel made it. It's not the pshat that the Eir is be'etzem a limited Eir. Mitzvahs are limited. Yeah. But normally the mitzvahs are mamshech only a limited Eir. But nevertheless, we said the mitzvahs are also mamshech the blig gvul, because since mitzvahs are the rotzen of the Eibishter, in the rotzen of the Eibishter there is blig gvul. We said before that the mitzvahs are mamshech gvul. This gvul is not really a gvul. The gvul that mitzvahs are mamshech, the gvul because the mitzvahs are limited, the gvul that mitzvahs are mamshech is be'etzem not a real gvul. Be'etzem is blig gvul. Why? Because it's not the pshat that this is a eir mugbul. You have eir mugbul, eir blig gvul. This is eir blig gvul. But the fact that it came into a gvul because the Eibishter himself was magbil himself that his blig gvul should be mugbul. Adi amshochas harotz no ein seifi. The ein seif, the amshocha of the Eibishter's rotzah, which is ein seif, which is blig gvul. So nimshich ven dafke ven metuti und di pula mugbelas. Only when you do the gvul, the Eibishter magbil himself that if you do the gvul, this eir should be nimshich. But we'll say why the Eibishter did it like that. A strange thing. Why did he say you should do something mugbul to bring the blig gvul? Did you say do something blig gvul, you bring the gvul? No, the Eibishter wanted for some reason, as we'll see soon, that the way to bring down this blig gvul should be through a gvul. So the Eibishter is magbil himself. Noch mehr, go further, as Olvernin an Eifen, which is Medide Adipula Zol Eschenen Ufnem Kelever. Another nikuda why what had happened here. The Eibishter wanted that you should do a gvul, and the gvul is connected really. The etzem it's not a gvul, it's blig gvul. But since you're doing it in the gvul way, so where the eir is supposed to come, the kele, which is gvul, is a kele to accept to receive that eir, because the gvul that you're doing, in essence, is really blig gvul of the Eibishter. So it comes in a shape, in a form of gvul, but since that gvul really is the rotzen of the Eibishter, b'meil its essence blig gvul. So two things: this mamsha the blig gvul. The Eibishter wanted it's not really mugbul, but he wanted that it should be in the gvul. So then the kele, which is the one that receives it, which is a gvul kele, should be a kele to receive the blig gvul. Since it's not limited be'etzem, in other words, because something else is limiting it. Nor was ein sobaruch sich allein made to magbil. The Eibishter is magbil himself. Losh nachsidus medide v'agbola atzmitz et yorom medide. It does be'emes nit kan agbola. It's not real agbola. We find in chassidus this nekuda that if a person is, and it's logical also. A person who's magbil himself is not a gvul. Imagine the person. Gvul means I'm limited. I'm locked in the door. I'm locked in the house. I'm limited. I can't walk out. It's against my will, let's say. But let's say if I myself locked myself in, so it's not a gvul against me. It's fakir. It's me. A gvul against me means it's limited to my mitzvah. It's not limited to my mitzvah. But that's what I want. If that's one, that's an expression of my Metzias. So a Hagbola Atzmis, a Gvul that somebody is Magbel himself, it's almost like saying if someone locks the door, but he has the key. He's doing it on his own. He locked himself because he wanted to lock it. So if the whole lock is because he wants it, so he could open it. So it's not a real Hagbola. It's okay, Laloch also. If you cover something, of covering of yourself is not called a covering. If you cover your head with your hand, whatever. But this is what it says in Chassidus. So a Mela comes out from here that Bemis the mitzvahs are the etzem, the tzeinashot ashbaruch, so it's a bli gvul, but it came in a tziyur of gvul because the Eibush, and it's not really a gvul because the Eibishter wanted that gvul. And why did he say he wanted that gvul? So we'll see that later. He wanted that gvul, but besides that, the Mela makes that the gvul should be a kela to the bli gvul because the gvul itself is not really gvul. Leidoch muss man haben die Hagbola. But we do need the gvul. So why do we need the gvul? The world is mugel. The world is a mitzias which is limited. So it can't receive, it's not a kela to receive the bligvul, eira bligvul, eira leki bligvul. But then will the bottle geworden. If a gvul kela will take the bligvul, it'll become bottle. The balde avede von Teire Mitzvah is verbunden mit der Metzias Welt. Since Teire Mitzvah is connected to the Welt, muss der Riber sein, dem Dide Vagbole Mitzvah. There has to be a limited mitzvah, which is basically repeating more or less what he said before in the middle here. That it's in order that the pool that we should be able to receive it, there should be a kela for it. So here he says it more. I don't know why it's in brackets, but he says it more that you have to have the Hagbola for this reason that the mitzvahs which is in Welt in Hagbola should be a kela. So you have to have the Hagbola, but that Hagbola is a kela to receive the bligvul, and because the mitzvahs are be'etzem bligvul. Das meint v'hoya mispar gemer. This is what it means that there'll be a mispar, but the mispar will be le'isofer. Mispar of gvul will be bligvul. But the mispar for mitzvahs niken emes medida. The mispar, which we said before, the mispar goes on mitzvahs, tells us it's not a mispar. It's limited. The mitzvahs are limited, but it's not a real limitation. Because through the mitzvahs, through the mitzvah is really the le'isofer. Which we see with the gang that we're going here. The whole question was, how do we put the two together? Why do we need the mispar if we have the le'isofer? So we see that in order to have the le'isofer, the nimshach has to be through the mitzvah. But you have to understand, since the whole purpose is to bring the Eireliki, which has no limit. Why did Hashem make this? Why did Eibush to make it so? That this Aveda should be connected to the Welt. And Welt is Mugbal. And Mugbal and Hagbola cannot accept it. There's all darfur sein, die Medidas for mitzvahs, weil are abtragen, am Rotz nach Bligvul and Eila Mugbal. So that's why the mitzvahs have to be gvul, today that the Eireliki should come down in the move. Why did Eibush to make it? What was the purpose? Why couldn't Eibush to make lachatchila that it should not be connected to gvul? I was saying the Rebbe doesn't say this, but why couldn't the whole Aveda be Aveda Satshuva? Since you have to be Mamshech Hagilu Yair, which is Bligvul, the whole Aveda should only be Aveda Satshuva, Aveda from Bligvul. Why did Eibush to make it should be Aveda Gvul in order to be Mamshech? And we say we need gvul because the Welt is gvul. And mitzvahs are connected to Welt, and maybe we need the gvul to be a kela to receive. Let the mitzvahs, let there nobody be no mitzvahs. Let there be only a Aveda shel bligvul. And if you have a Aveda shel bligvul, there's no problem. Why did he have to do that? Is a beer in them, the explanation is, those was mitzvahs eine gegeben worden, lamata bakbola. This as mitzvahs was given down here and then limited. Is es nicht mitzad dem, was they müssen nimshich werden lamata, und der mata hat dem chesorim nakbola. It would seem Poshup, he would think, mitzvahs have to come down here. For some reason, mitzvahs have to be down here. And down here is Hagbola. So the Hagbola is a side thing. Dikir is the mitzvahs. It happened to be that mitzvahs happen to be down here. So there has, and down here is Hagbola. So mitzvahs are Hagbola. Anders kämen dann nicht tuft on dem Blik will sein durch seine Slapschen dem Dide Hagbola for mitzvahs. And therefore, since the Welt is Hagbola, and we want to be Mamshech Bligvul, so they wish made that the mitzvah should be Hagbola. Because if the mitzvahs, which are be'etzem Bligvul, they are a kela for the Bligvul. But you have to have, the kela should be Hagbola, because it has to come down into Welt, and Welt is Hagbola. That's not the pshat. The reason why the Eibishter made the mitzvahs by Hagbola is while the tachlis ilu is not in the Bligvul Malay Sofer, Fazir. The tachlis is not to have the Bligvul. The tachlis is not to be Mamshech Eira Bligvul. Nor der Chibur from Gvul and Bligvul. The combination between Gvul and Bligvul. As mispar guf is only alven in leyama yom disater. The Eibishter wants that the mispar, the gvul, should become connected to the bligvul. It's not just that it happened to be that really the ikir is the bligvul. The bligvul has to come down the mata, and the mata is mugvul, so we have no choice. So we have to make the kela to have a gvul. It's not that. The tachlis is the gvul. Akaponim, the combination of the bligvul and gvul. Dafki in them drik sechus the keich atzmus with hecha seifem gvul and seifem bligvul. But where mamshech is not stam, as we said before, where mamshech bligvul. Before we said mitzvahs are mugvul, but nevertheless we're mamshech the keich bligvul. Mitzvahs are gvul and mamshech the keich bligvul. But for mamshech is mamshech atzmus. The etzem of the Eibishter. The etzem of the Eibishter is higher than gvul and bligvul. Because you know the Eibishter is completely unlimited, infinite. Bligvul is also Hagbola. What's a Hagbola? Hagbola limit means it's this and not something else. This is mukbal to being a sefer. It's a Hagbola. It's not a computer. It's different things. That's Hagbola. If you say it's something, not something else, already it's Hagbola. When you say it's bligvul, that's Hagbola. There's something it's not. Bligvul means it's not gvul. The moment it's something and not something else, it's already Hagbola. It's something and not something else. That's called gvul. So, but there are levels of gvul, levels of bligvul. Atzmus is higher than gvul and bligvul because he's the real bligvul. We have no other words to use, so we use the real bligvul. He's the real bligvul. The etzem of the Eibishter is higher than gvul and bligvul. And when do we express, or whether we mamshich, the etzem of the Eibishter, when we do something that combines the gvul and the bligvul? It's not limited, not the gvul, not the bligvul. Like it says in the Vedas HaKedesh, Chassidus brings from Kabbalah, Hashem sheyesh lekeach bebligvul, kach yesh lekeach begvul. The Eibishter is lekeach on gvul equally. Because he's higher than both, and both equal. Bligvul is also not the etzem of the Eibishter. So when do we see that the hamshach of the etzem is when you combine gvul and bligvul? Und the riber can sein nor durch the medida atzmus von atzmus in sobaruch. So when can there be the real hamshach of atzmus? If you have the gvul, which is really bligvul, like we said before. It's at eres for giluyim zayin bligvul and gvul tzvei bazundir inyon. If you go from the level of giluyim of eres, not the etzem of the Eibishter, but eres sof, then you have gvul and you have bligvul. They're two separate inyonim. After the medida von atzmus in sobaruch. Only mitzad the Eibishter's etzem, that he is able to be magbil himself, which we said before, if he's magbil himself, that is itself bligvul, can zayin the chibur from gvul and bligvul. Then you could have the combination of gvul and bligvul. Al derech, we find that in the Peil Mamish. The Oren did not take up space, which means it didn't take up space. It took up space, but it took up space and not taking up space at the same time. In order to be an Oren, it has to have a limit. The Pasuk says how big the Oren has to be, so it has to have the limitation, which is Amasayim v'chotzi orke, 2.5 amas length, etc., etc. When their mokim is einem in amid, it's not part of it. In Gashmi is what it means is poshet. Let's say the Oren was in the Kedesh HaKadoshim. Let's use the Mishkan as an example. Kedesh HaKadoshim was from one wall to the other was 10 amas, on both sides. The Oren in the middle took up, let's say, 2.5 amas. So if you count from the one end, since from one wall to the other, if you counted from one wall to the other, it was 10 amas. So if you counted from one wall till the Oren, and then from the other side of the Oren till the other wall, so it should be, so since the Oren was in the middle, it should be 10 amas minus 2.5. It should be 7.5 amas. Because there's 7.5 amas on the sides, because from wall to wall is 10. In the middle, the Oren was 2.5. Lepel, it wasn't like that. When they measured from wall to wall, it was 10 amas. When they measured from one side of the Oren to the wall, was 5 amas. The other side of the Oren, 5 amas. The Oren was 2.5 amas. How could it be? Because the Oren didn't take up space. So from one side of the Oren was 5, the other side was 5, because it was 10. But the Oren did take up space. So it took up space and didn't take up space at the same time. So it was measured Gvul and bligvul together. And das is eich was birchas Moshe vet nit botl eich noch dem der Rebischte ben stieg mit der broche shen letitzah. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu's broche, which is a broche that has a limit, doesn't become bottle even when we have the Eibishter's broche, which is bligvul. Well, the tachlis hakavon is nit as a bottle when der inyan from gvul. The tachlis is not it should be bottle. If you'd be bottle, if the inyan would be bottle of the inyan of gvul, so the moment we have the Eibishter's broche bligvul, we don't need Moshe's broche, which is gvul. The tachlis is gvul should stay, and you should have the bligvul. The other soll sein der Chibur from Gvul and Bligvul. You should have both. You have the combination of both. And the Rebbe is do Saibir Chasmeisha Yesev Elefom, it was Saibir had the Broch of Meisha, which is 1,000 times, the Broch is 1,000 times more. Was Tutuv as the Bria, the Medidos, the Zaymatachas Hashlemus. He gave this Broch, and Broch means it should be a lot. That means that it's Gvul, but a big Shlemus dik is Gvul. The Gvul should be, you can have a Gvul, a small Gvul, you have a big Gvul. So Meisha give a Broch, it should be 1,000 times as much. Because it's the Ribu from Elopom becomes so much like 1,000 times. It quotes in Torah 28, Lahoyer from Rashi. 1,000 times is a lot. Is a very lot. And the Noch, at the same time, when we have this Shleimus in Gvul, the big Gvul, and after that, the Loshen is Kishiyov Yakadosh Baruch HaMeisha, and Ebishe will come, is in them Gufa vet Nimshe B'Chosesh HaKadosh Baruch HaShem L'Kitzah. In the Gvul, you'll get the Broch of Ebishe, which is Bli Gvul. Es vet nit nor Aribu Vifel es Ken Zayim Sad Gider Abriya nor Aribu Shei L'Kitzah. That what makes is that the Gvul has the Bli Gvul in it. That you have a Ribu, not only Mitzad Gvul, which is going to stay. In that Gvul, you'll have a Ribu, which is Bli Gvul. So that answers the Shaila, why we need both. And mitkem nevaris and das was quickly Schapiro Chami Admura gesagt. This could explain something that the Prediker Rebbe said. As I thought that quickly Admur Bar Shabnish was saying that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, like Lepom Rabbis Meisiv Zayin Loshna Medich and Shtava Kadosh Baruch Elias Ledira B'Tachtenim, that he would add when he would quote the Medish where it says Shtava Kadosh Baruch Elias Ledira B'Tachtenim. David had a taiva, had a desire to make a Dira B'Tachtenim. He would add them word Yisborech. Lias loy Yisborech Dira B'Tachtenim. But that the word Yisborech. That means when he said loy, the Eibishter wanted to him, so he gave the Eibishter a bracha. Like when you say a bracha, you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei. You say that's the Pashup Pshat. He said loy Yisborech. The Churutz Rabbi, you have to understand. Emes have them the Demanda Eibishter's name that from the Mishabeach are true. That when you mention Hashem's name, the real way to do it is you have to praise Him. Aber mir gefunden mir als bei Iber sagen Aloshe von Maimer Azal. We don't find that when they said over in Maimer Azal, wo es wird dem Mond Eibish's Nomen, with the Eibish's name, other Maimer Azal, but the Eibish's name is mentioned, so in Kveit Kedusha, as Rabbi said, and they say that zulegen the word Yisborech. They didn't. Every time they mention Maimer Azal, which says HaKadosh Baruch, they said Yisborech. So it's obviously not because of that reason, just because since you mentioned Hashem's name, you have to praise it. Muss man sagen, dass es da a Keshe, v'shayches miyichedes zwischen der Minya von Yisborech, mit Ninja von Yisabak, Kadosh Baruch Hu Elias Ledira B'Tachtenim. Must be that the word Yisborech as a shaykh, has a connection to the Teichen, not just because they mentioned Loi, Eibishter, so you say Yisborech, to what the whole statement means, the Teichen of the statement of Nisabak, Kadosh Baruch Hu Elias Ledira B'Tachtenim. So to understand that, if it's connected to that, let's understand what does that mean, Nisabak, Kadosh Baruch Hu Elias Ledira B'Tachtenim. Then we'll see why the Yisborech fits in here. The Shlemer, the beer, and then you can say the Pshat is like this. The linya from Dira B'Tachtenim is Kele Beit Ksavos. When you say the word Dira B'Tachtenim, this itself contains the two sides that we said before, the Gvul and the Bli Gvul. Dira is Aloshen was weiß Adovert Nimshach Hatzmusam is Baruch Habilti Balgul. When you say it's going to be a Dira for Davish, what's a Dira? A Dira is a dwelling place, a house where you live. That means that Davish himself is going to live here. That's him. Al derech ve'adira lamata was gefinzich de'odem b'chalatz musa. Just like when you have a house you live in the house you live in, you live. It's not a pshat. It's a house where you keep your storage, you keep your clothes. It's a house where you live. Same thing by David. If you use that losh by David, as David himself is there. So it's that same of David. And that's Bli Gvul. But we say Dira B'Tachtenim. Tachtenim means Elam Hazat Tacht, Nishem Tacht Lamataman. It says Tanya, Elam Hazat Tacht, this is the lowest. Tachlis Gvul, the highest Gvul you could think of. And Dira, on the other side, we say Dira B'Tachtenim means the Chibur from Bli Gvul and Gvul. That's what Dira B'Tachtenim means. That it's the Dira isn't the Tachtenim. It's not the Pshat that comes down a Dira, Uis Tachtenim, no more Tachtenim. Because it comes the Bli Gvul, there's no more Gvul. It doesn't say that. It says there's a Dira, which is the Bli Gvul, in the Tachtenim, the combination of Dira of Gvul and Bli Gvul, which is the union of Atzmas, as we said before, the Etzem of Deibishter, is the combination of Gvul and Bli Gvul. Now the question is, how could a Tachtenim, which is very mobile, very limited, to become a Dira to Etzem of the Eibishter, which is built in Gvul, which is no Gvul, and remain in their Metzias? The Dira in them, they suffer from the answer is the Rabbi Rashab. He put in the word Yisborech. It's not because he mentioned Eibishter's name, Leib. It's because to explain this concept of Eibishter could make a Dira B'Tachtenim. What does the word Yisborech mean? The linya from Dira Lei, that Musber, how could there be a Dira Lei B'Tachtenim, will be explained to Chunteichon linya from Yisborech. By using the word Yisborach, which is the word Brocha. So when we think of what the word Brocha means, that explains how you can have a dira b'tachtenim, the gvul into the gvul. What does that mean? Abir, explain how this. The chiluk between Brocha and Tefillah, it says in Chassidus, there's a difference between Brocha and Tefillah. Give a Brocha or you daven to the Eibishter to give you something. Brocha is mamshech dos was is doing sheirish in Brocha. It says in Chassidus that Brocha is the word hamshocha, it means brings down. You give a Brocha, it means there are certain things that are there l'mayla and you want it to come down into this world. So you give a brocha is mamshech. Whatever is there, basically whatever is not there l'mayla, brocha doesn't help. Brocha is to bring down. Someplace it says brocha is like a brecha. Brecha means like a pool that the water from someplace else comes here. It doesn't create water. So a brocha can't create something that's not there in the shadish. Hashem can tefillah tutuf an arotzim chodesh. Tefillah could make a debish that didn't have a rotzen before. You're making a new rotzen, something that's not there l'mayla, and you could make it cause debish to change. Yehi rotzen. The lotion is let there be a new rotzen. Anaya minya was is nitoin sheirish shemoker, something new that's not in the sheirish shemoker. That's the difference between by a person who gives a broch and a person who davens. Was is aber ben geya birchas boser vadam. That's only when a broch of a human being. Schenken ben geya birchas hakadosh baruch hu. By the broch of the Eibishter, the Balda der Eibishter noch nicht gebunden chas v'sholem mit dieses Vagbolos from Sheirish and Nivra Misporach. Since the Eibishter is not limited to what's there in the Sheirish. The Eibishter can do what he wants. So if the Eibishter gives a brocha, it's not dafke what's there in the Sheirish to be mamshir. But Zayin brocha, if the Ma'ila from Tefillah, the Eibishter's brocha contains what Tefillah is. That means it could bring down from higher levels, even if it's not there, but it creates it in the higher levels and brings it down. He can meaning the brocha of the Eibishter could accomplish something new. Was his hecher from the sheirish shemoker and nivri, which is beyond the sheirish, the root and the source of where the nivri is. Was haste, as in Birchas Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and Dob Beidik Tzovis. In the Eibishter's broch, you have two extremes. See, the line hecher from sheirish shemoker and nivri, hecher from the shtalshus. The broch of the Eibishter goes all the way up, higher than the sheirish of the nivri, which we call higher than sheirish shtalshus. Bringt das aro, but brings it down, which is the word broche, hamshocha, no mailo lamata, coming down. As from hecher from the shtalshus, wird nimshach zum nivri in the shtalshus. Higher in the shtalshus, it comes down to the nivri in the shtalshus. It comes down here lamata. Give a brocha that somebody has to be healthy. So if the mile in the shtalshus, if you regular brocha, if it's the concept of health is there lamata, you could bring it down. Tefillah can accomplish it even if it's not there. But the brocha of the Eibishter could bring down something from mile in the shtalshus. He's not limited to anything. It's not there in the sheirish of the nivra and brings it down to the nivra. That's the other two. That's the extreme. It's the gvul that connects to the gvul. Those are the beer and them there is soft and Yisavakadosh Baruch Hu Leib Baruch Dir B'Tachtenim. That's what the Rebbe Rashav, why he added the word that the Eibishter makes a Dir B'Tachtenim. He added the word Yisborach. Those was Tachtenim kennen werden a Dir Leib. Lats Musik, this that the Tachtenim down here could become a Dira to him, to the Etzem of the Eibishter. Where Musbet, this is explained durch the meaning from Berchose Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yisborach, we give it say the Eibishter's Broche. That's two Yisborach. Yisborach means there should be a brocha. The Eibishter could make that there should be a brocha to be nimshach. These mamshich from the mile of the Seder Shtalshus in Seder Shtalshus. It brings from higher than Seder Shtalshus into Seder Shtalshus. So far, L'chura, it seems everything understood. It's bleibt understood, whatever we understand of it. But es bleibt noch alles nicht verstanden. Still not understood. Die Balder Chibu von Gvul und Blikvul is Rabbi Kirche Shel HaKadosh Baruch was his hecher from Zebede. Since we just said this combination of Gvul and Blikvul could only come with the Kirche of the Eibishter, the Etzem, which is higher than Gvul and Blikvul, higher than both. But was sie das verbunden mit der Avede von Nivre? Was L'chura seinig and Avede Mukbele, so hat sie mit der Atzm und Kirche zum Amschluss einer Reihe Mukbul. So why did the Eibishter make it that in order to bring down such a high madrege, you have to do through the Gvul? It's connected to what the Nivra does. It has to come through the Gvul. Why? It's at the Eibishter, Gvul and Blikvul are both the same. So why did he want Afket should come through Gvul? In other words, the Eibishter could be mamshach, the combination of Gvul and Blikvul without the Aved of the Nivra. So the Eibishter, they're both equal. And the Eibishter can combine both. So the Eibishter on his own could combine them both. The Eibishter could make the Dir B'Tachtenim. We're saying, no, you need a Nivra to do something to make that should come down. Why do we need a Nivra to do it? Is the beer and then we get come upon the explanation, like the Rebbe I spoke many times. The Eibishter's rotzen is as the Giluyim Shalamayla zol nit kommen in an Eifim from Namadi Kesufa. The Eibishter wanted that all the Giluyim that come from above should not come in the form of, the literal translation is shame, bread of shame. It says if somebody gets something that he didn't deserve, he didn't earn, he's embarrassed to take it. No one wants to hand me downs. You want to work for it. The Gemara says that a person would rather have one kav, yesim tisha kav and shachavere, more than someone else gives him 9 times as much. He'd rather get less, but if he deserves it, he worked for it. What should be his? So the Eibishter wants that when he gives us all these giluyim, it should be not named kesufa, which means not something that we didn't deserve, something that we have to work for. The far as an alam shochas, that's why all the shochas, even those that are higher from the Geder and Nivroim, like we're saying now, Shochav Atzmas Eisov, which is the Chibur Gvul, has to come through. If the Eibush is going to be Megale to us, has to come through our Aveda. And the Rive, therefore, Agama the Dirali is very much even though when the Eibush brings down that high Madrege, it's not that we deserve it. We cannot reach that Madrege. It's like a present. Muzer Bazayin der Ovid Lenaichel and Nafshe from Mason Amatone. Says when a person gives a present, it's not a pshat you deserved it. That's not if you deserve it, you earned it. It's a salary, it's not a present. Present means that you didn't work for it. Nevertheless, the Gemara says, who does a person give a present to? Somebody who did me a favor, somebody who I like. It says if the person wouldn't do some pleasure, give him some nachas, the yoiv matanti wouldn't give him matana. So here too, what we get from this high madrege of giloy of atzmas is a matana. We can't reach it. We don't deserve it. We can bring it down. But nevertheless, in order to get it, there's something we have to do. When dafka demel the matanta, this matana is given only to do something. The says it means first, the nivroim down here have to be the shleimus have to do the way they complete. When there's demelt versus a nimsha from the mile masherish and nivroim, then they do their best. Then they're mamsha from a higher madrege, which is higher than the nivroim. This is what it says by the bracha that the Kohanim give. Was a bench need mishlechus shalakadosh baruch hu. They give the bracha, the shlichus of the Eibishter. A bracha was his hecher for the shtalshelus. If it's a bracha from the Eibishter, the shluchim of the Eibishter higher than the shtalshelus. But then we have a question. The Balda, the Eibishter will bench Eden. If the Eibishter wants to bench Eden, if I was there for Zayin to the Kohanim, why does he need the human beings, the Kohanim, to do it? As they don't bench Eden, the Keicha shalakadosh baruch hu, they should bench in the Keich of the Eibishter. The Eibishter Leica doesn't bench. The Eibishter can bench himself. But the Indian is canal, the Indian, like I said before, the Kavone, Hol Yena is what the Eibishter really wants is, as the Brochas Shochas seinen Hecher von der Stalshelus, darf nimshach werden durch Aveda Sodom durch die Kohanim. And even the Meilam Mishtalshelus, but the Eibishter wants we should do something for it. So it should come through the Mata. So the Kohanim who are the Mata, they give the Brocha. But they bring down the Brocha of the Eibishter, which is the Meilam Mishtalshelus. Up he says movement, so now we really understand, goes back to the beginning. Even though we have the Brocha of the Eibishter, which is the Brocha of Eile Kitzu Blikvul. He's a Bedur Bechosah Shomesha, was his bring Shlemus on Ibrahim. Meisha's bracha was that there should be very much of the nivra part, of the mukvul part. So through the bracha, which makes the shlemus and nivroim, that makes the bracha of the Eibishter more b'shlemus. Not which way is a more b'shlemus? The Eibishter doesn't need us to make his bracha b'shlemus, but it should be nit kenama dikisufa. Makes the real bracha of the Eibishter is when he gives it to us in a form that we don't feel embarrassed. The mele, that's why we need Meisha Rabbeinu's bracha. The bracha makes the shlemus of the nivra. Shleimus of the Gvul, and then you're a cable for the Bli Gvul, and we have the combination of both. Question he has before when it says, he managed that on this pasuk, Yosef Hashem Aleichem Kachem Elafomim, it says that the taisvas, the extra, the addition that the Eibishter that Moshe Rabbeinu said is more than the Iker. And the question was, if it's more, then why is this original called the Iker? The Iker can, if something less than what he gives later, then this is not the Iker anymore. So the Rebbe answers, if you baldi tachtenim zayin es mamsh, the sins what the Eibishter adds, the Yidden bring through their Aveda, that's why the original bracha, which is the lower level, which is the bracha of the Mugbul, that's called Iker. That's the Iker reason why the bracha of the Eibishter comes. Because if not for that, the Eibishter wouldn't give on the bracha, would be missing in the shleimus of the Eibishter's bracha kibiyachol. That's why this is called the Iker. The Rebbe says now, call on now. I mentioned before that the CFU is going to be very short. What we said before is Pshat in the Medrash, is Eich the Inyonim Mefloim plus Imperish Rashi. This also is the Inyonim Mefloim means that in Rashi we find, besides the simple Pshat, we find deeper Inyonim. So the Inyan that we explained before, the Gvul and the Gvul, all these Inyonim, this is not only Pshat in Medrash and Gemara, this is also Pshat in Rashi. But in which part of Rashi? Not the Pshuta Shenikra, the Yonim Mefloim in Rashi. Was bring Techna Sifri Medrash, which also brings the Losh of the Medrash. So that's all when they get the deeper Pshat in Rashi. What's this Pshuta Shel Rashi? What is the Poshup Pshat in Rashi? So here the Rebbe is going to say one little paragraph and not explain it. In the order 41 star, he says, to understand this paragraph more, look in the previous Sikha, the Sikha right before this one. There it goes on the Rashi, the same Rashi, but go Barichas and Pshat. But here the Rebbe just says one short thing. Rashi is saying, as Bichos Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu do, maintenance, the Avtoche, Asher Yuchol Ish Limnes. It says a brocha from Deibishter, which is a posik in Beishit, that Deibishter said to Avram Avinu that look at the stars. You can't count the stars. You won't be able to count your descendants also. So when Deibishter hears, when Moshe said Deibishter will give you his brocha, which brocha does it mean? It means that brocha that he said to Avram, a brocha that there will be no limnes, there will be no counting. There means verbinteres mit monadavke. That's connected with what it says by Bilam mimona afar yanke mimona. Is there a minyan? Was when is those kipirish Rashi ketargumei? Rashi says on the posik mimono ketargumei, like the Targum. What does the Targum say? Zman is when asidim diachsim almo. When they're going to yash in the land, that means losit lovid. So Rashi here, the way he says pshat in Rashi, that since Rashi says that it's connected, that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Deibishter's brocha is beyond limitations, that's connected in simple pshuta shel mikro. That's connected to the posik mimono. And there Rashi already explained that what's mimona would be losid lovely. So pshat in Rashi means how do we combine the two things in pshat, not in chassidus that we just said. So it seems like the Rebbe is going back to that pshat that it's in two zmanim. It's man now and it's man losid lovely. That's why in the beginning, in the order that we mentioned before, order 11, he says that we must say according to Rashi that at the same time. That's what the Rebbe said before. And that's how he went on to say that the gvul and bli gvul at the same time. And he adds avol. Sifyud, that the Rebbe does say that it's possible pshat in Rashi that he means two times, and it's hinted, and it's in pshat of Pshuta Shel Mikra says it that this posik of the Eibishter's brocha is connected to, like it says by Avram Avinu, im yuchal ish limnes, and that's connected to mimono. And Rashi already said by the case of mimono that it goes on lots of and that's how in Pshuta Shel Mikra we answer this Stira. Again, this is a real deep chassidus sicha. We have to learn it over and over again till we grasp it really.
I thought it's going to turn out to be that the Rebbe will say that the bracha, the gvul has to come through Moshe Rabbeinu himself. But that's not what it ended up being.
Didn't say that, right?
He didn't say that.
Well, the Rebbe would say a lot of time when he said sichas and the Diurim, ten lachocham v'yech kameid. So he left it over for us to add because it's true. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Thank you.